Welcome everybody to the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association's Facebook page and our series of Share Your HCM Story. I do have a special announcement of sorts today before we begin this broadcast, and that is this one's a little bit different because the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association felt it very important to bring into the fold of our organization all of those with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy spectrum disorders. This is a term you're going to hear us talking about more and more. What are spectrum disorders? They are the non-sarcomeric mutation causes of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. There are a number of different syndromes that can cause the presentation of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, but it's part of a larger disease process, such as what we're going to talk about today in part, which is Noonan syndrome and muscular dystrophy. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome my guest, and we go to two screens, Rob Besecker, who is coming to us from the Midwest today. And I was lucky enough to meet Rob at a meeting out in Palo Alto, California a few weeks ago at Stanford. And I thought his story was amazing, and I wanted to share it with you all. So Rob, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It was a pleasure meeting you as well. And my name is Rob Besecker. I live in a south suburb of Chicago, and I work for a large healthcare system in the area. And I've had an interesting health background, which is why we're here.
Yeah, it's a very interesting background, and everybody can see on the tagline, there's even a book about it. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But of course, the first question, Rob, is when did you first hear the term hypertrophic cardiomyopathy?
You know, it's really interesting. The first time I heard about HCM was in 2003. So originally in 2000, I was diagnosed with something called atrial fibrillation, which is just due to some of the electrical abnormalities in my heart. But then in 2003, I went through further testing as a result of trying to join the military. We went to war in 2003. I'm a very patriotic person. And so I saw my fourth cardiologist over the course of 3 years because I had moved around so much. And upon further testing, I finally got diagnosed with AFib, A-flutter, sick sinus syndrome, sinus node dysfunction, Noonan syndrome, which we talked about, and then, of course, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy.
And how old were you when all this was going on?
I was 28 years young.
28 years young, and that's an awful lot of different diagnoses associated with what was going on with you. So you've gotten this diagnosis of Noonan syndrome, which is a restopathy, and which can have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy associated with it. What did they do to take care of that? Did they treat you with anything?
You know, there's not a whole lot they can do with the Noonan syndrome. So it was a clinical classification based on several physical characteristics that I have, along with my heart conditions and the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So as a result of all the electrical problems that were going on with my heart, I was told I absolutely had to have surgery to implant a pacemaker, and they recommended a defibrillator due to a questionable background with my family, along with the diagnosis of HCM.
So what was going on with the family history?
Well, I had an uncle who died at the age of 16. He dropped over dead in gym class, and that was all the way back in 1956. And then my mom and several of my uncles had pacemakers, and they had electrical issues. None of them were quite the same as mine. None of them had the same issues as I did, and nobody else in my family had hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So my situation was a little different. And a few years later, in 2006, when I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, we think we identified why.
So you have Noonan syndrome with HCM at the background and muscular dystrophy.
Hey,
you're pretty healthy.
You're going to do something. Do it right, right?
So big. So how is your quality of life on a daily basis?
For the most part, I have a great quality of life. I learned several years back to enjoy the moment, to do what you can as long as you can. And that's something I take with me. I take it to me with work. I take it to me with my book. And I take it in my personal life. So I just want to enjoy every day to the best of my ability and do as much as I can while I still can.
So I'm going to hold this up. This is the book, Everest Strong. And there's a link on this page where you can get your own copy. And I'm in the middle of reading it right now. I got it on my way back from California. You've been through some really interesting challenges there, Rob. Tell us a little bit about, life with a defibrillator when it's not quite working well. What happened?
Originally in 2003, when I had my first surgery to install the defibrillator, I was really worried. I have a very athletic background. I went to college on a baseball scholarship. I was always a big weightlifter, always big on exercise and so on and so forth. So I was really worried about what the scar and what the protrusion in my body was going to look like. But, interestingly enough, when I first came out of surgery in 2003, I kind of felt like they put an angel in my chest. I know that's a weird way to talk about it, but it truly made me feel comfortable. And so through the years, I'm on my third defibrillator now. My first one was installed in 2003. In 2008, I had a regular replacement due to, the deterioration of the battery because I'm paced a large portion of the time. And then actually in 2011, I had another ICD replaced as a result of I had some malfunctions. My lead had broken and I was receiving what they called inappropriate shocks at the time. So I'm on my third device, and interestingly enough, something I like to talk about, my first device was from Guidant, which is now Boston Scientific. My second device was from Medtronic, and my third device is from St. Jude. So I've hit all the big ICD companies.
You are an equal opportunity utilizer of implantable medical devices.
Absolutely.
That's funny. I was originally a guide, and then I was in Medtronic, and my daughter's a St. Jude. So
yeah.
I'm with you on that one. So this book is really interesting. I'm like I said, I'm still getting through it, but you went to Everest Base Camp, and that probably wasn't something that made people really comfortable up front, that you said, I want to go to Everest. Tell us how this happened. Why?
It's really interesting. So in 2010, I went to my seventh and final continent. I love to travel. And I was in Antarctica, and I had the opportunity to meet a gentleman by the name of Peter Hillary. And so the Hillary name is in Everest lore. His father was the first to ever summit Mount Everest back in 1953. So I came back from that trip, and I had an arrangement with my cardiologist. I was set to have an ablation. And so, just to fast forward through 2011, it was an absolutely horrible year where just about everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And I had 5 cardiac surgeries over the course of the year. I had 5 calls to 911. I had 7 ER visits. It was just a crazy year. And so at the end of that, a lot of people were questioning my survival, and just about everybody doubted my recovery. And so it just so happened in 2012 that my sister and I, my sister is also in healthcare, were invited to do a hiking expedition to Everest Base Camp. And I thought, what would be a better statement of recovery, that nothing can keep us down, than doing an expedition to the base camp of the tallest mountain in the world. So that became my goal.
Okay. Not exactly a common goal, I would say, for somebody with a heart problem. What did your doctors have to say about this idea?
And your reaction to that was absolutely perfect, because when my doctors first heard about that, they thought I was nuts. And they were completely and totally against it. So in 2012 is when I first proposed this. But interestingly enough, throughout my entire health background, and then again in 2012, I made a really good recovery. And a lot of my doctors said, you know what, Rob, this is just a blip on the radar. You're doing really well. Keep up the good work. You should be able to live in what they called a normal, healthy life. And so I understand that a normal, healthy life is different for everybody. But for me, I've always been a very active person. And doing a hiking expedition like this is not something that's totally out of my frame of reality. So I wanted to make sure that I checked all the boxes. I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything as healthy as I could, as safely as I could. And I wanted to determine first if it was something I could actually do. And then when I determined I could do it, that my body wasn't so limited that I wouldn't be able to do this trip, I followed through. And then finally, 3 years later, after a vigorous training program and a lot of work and a lot of collaboration with my doctors, I was able to do the hiking expedition in 2015.
2015. Why is Everest in 2015 something that sticks in my mind?
You know, the nature of my entire story is very unique, and I talk about it in depth in my book. But interestingly enough, when we were coming back down from Everest Base Camp, there was a 7.8 magnitude earthquake that struck the country in Nepal. And it killed over 10,000 people, and it left homeless hundreds of thousands of others. And I was right smack dab in the middle of the mountains when that happened. So it's a survival story, again, and it's about overcoming all the obstacles that we all face in life, whether it be health-related, work-related, relationship-related. We all have these obstacles, and no matter what happens to us, taking the opportunity to continue to pursue our goals and dreams.
Yes, and I'm struck by the fact that all of those other obstacles can be there in front of you, and then literally the earth shakes under your feet while you're trying to accomplish a goal. And you got out okay, and I can't wait to read that chapter, and the earth shakes. And the bridge that you show in the book here, I would have had a panic attack going over, and even with my new heart, I don't think I could do it, because that seems a little bit scary. So you've written this book about your experiences, and you work in a line of work in healthcare and palliative care, where you have to confront mortality on a regular basis, both at work and in yourself. You know, I told you before we started here today that my favorite quote from a poem is from Mary Oliver. It says, "Tell me what you plan to do with your one wild and precious life." And I think you have embraced your challenges, and you've created a pathway for yourself that is unique, and it is energetic, and it is empowering, all with a very serious underlying condition. How do you keep a good attitude about this, and how do you get by every day?
Well, thank you. And don't get me wrong, it was tough. You know, I've had my struggles just like many people have their struggles. And it's not always easy to stay positive. But the fact of the matter is, I broke it down to a very simple perspective so I could understand it. And when we get knocked down in life, we have two choices. We can either get back up and keep going, or we can stay down and feel sorry for ourselves. And so often I've seen people, again, through both my work, through my family life, as well as through my personal life, I've seen people that allow some of the disabilities and some of the negative things that happen to us in life, let it keep us down. And I just like the alternative so much better. I want to keep doing what I can while I can, and I've seen some wonderful places in the world. And, you know, one of the true testaments is having the ability to meet so many wonderful people like yourself when I go to some of these different conferences and participate. It's absolutely amazing and inspiring.
Well, I was very inspired when I met you and heard your story, and we got to have a little time after the meeting to hang out with the little post-party we got together. I'm going to give everybody here an opportunity to ask some questions, and whatever they want to ask, they're able to ask. If we don't want to answer, we won't answer. But we'll get those coming on in a minute. When I say, so now type your questions, and we'll tell you to send them off in a second. So you've met a lot of people in the cardiac field, and in the muscular dystrophy world, in the Noonan's world. If you had to tell somebody who's newly diagnosed today, who is back where you were in 2003, about what their future might hold, what advice might you give them about mindset and where to begin the process?
I would tell them to do their best to stay positive. As far as what the future holds, you know, the future holds whatever you want it to hold. There's so many different things that we can aspire to do, and we're going to have our limitations. So one of the things I talk about in my book is making modifications. So we can all set our goals and dreams and ambitions, and we can all start to pursue those. And there's always going to be detours in life, and we don't always know what they're going to be. Some are going to be positive, some are going to be negative, but do our best to keep going. And the fact of the matter is, you know, I would love to be able to summit Mount Everest, but my body won't allow that. So I had to make the modification to go to base camp. I'm not always going to be able to go to base camp. So someday I might have to make the modification that maybe I just fly out to Nepal, and so on and so forth. We all have to make those modifications, but keep going. Stay positive and keep going.
I think that's a fantastic message. If anybody wants to send a question, send it now. Michael, who's here in New Jersey with me, is really enjoying this series. And more importantly for today's conversation, can't wait to read the book. And I'm hoping a lot of the people who are watching today have a similar idea there. So now you can send your questions in, and I'll ask them a couple questions while we start. So you live in Chicago, you travel a lot, you work. Are you married? Are you single? Do you have kids?
I am not married, and I do not have any children. I found dating in my 30s with heart conditions, and one of the interesting things about me is they can't necessarily forecast my life expectancy or when I'm going to have problems. So this is one of the things that could easily keep me down and potentially keep me from doing things. But I find it, as an opportunity to go ahead and pursue the things I can do. And, thankfully, I've met a lot of people in my life, and I've met somebody special in my life recently. So we've been dating for a while, and we'll see what happens.
Well, good luck with that, because those are never going to be issues to navigate. But I think some people wonder the questions of, what is your future going to look like? Are you going to have a family? Are you going to focus on working your book? And we all have our own paths, and it's not one right path. There's opportunities for families that are not biological. And so you've given that some thought as well.
Absolutely. I'm one of those people that I always wanted kids. I always thought I would be a better husband and father than any kind of man. But, to a large extent, that option was taken away from me in my inability to have children of my own. But by the same token, there's a lot of wonderful people out there with kids, and there's a lot of kids out there that could be adopted. So, again, those are some of the modifications that we need to make, and stay positive and keep going. And, I'm comfortable that in the end, when time is right, everything will work out the way it's supposed to.
I think you're right. So Mike is involved with this conversation today, and says that your comments are so on point. I noticed recently a lot of people on the page have been very down emotionally. My attitude is so much like your own. When you're having a bad day, what gets it turned around for you?
That's a great question, and thanks, Michael. It can be anything. I often think about my parents. Both my parents are deceased at this point. And, one of the things that helps me a lot, both my faith as well as reviewing my parents, and I want them to be proud of me. And the fact that they're not still here physically, they're still with me emotionally, and they always will be. And so that's the thing. I've created a situation in my life where I want to reach out to people and I want to help people, both through my book, both through my job, and through all the many organizations that I participate in. And having the ability to give back like that, there are so many people that I meet. I don't ever feel like I'm doing this alone. And whenever I'm having a bad day, I know there's somebody I'm connected with that is having a good day. And whenever I'm having a good day, I know that somebody's having a bad day. So it keeps me very balanced.
I can relate to that quite a bit. When I have my bad times, my community picks me up. When they're having their bad times, I pick them up. And I think when you look at overall long-term survival and who does your long-term physically and mentally, it's those that have strong support around them that do the best. And that's one thing they may try to target today is create that system of support so nobody's ever doing you alone.
Absolutely, because the fact of the matter is I couldn't have gotten to where I've gotten, and I couldn't do what I'm doing by myself. I've had so many different people, including yourself, Lisa, that have helped me along the way, and my thanks go out to everybody. People who are even watching this broadcast, that's an amazing first step, and just keep going.
Exactly. Well, we have Michael is really in this conversation. Proud of you.
Thank you so much.
Michael's a great guy. So hope to do that again, Michael. Well, anything else you'd like to tell those who are this page Specifically, let's think, for comment from Connie. Thank you for sharing. Like Rob said, comments on sometimes I feel inferior to others. Let's talk about that before we wrap up. Do you ever feel like this really helps?
You know, interestingly enough, I learned a long time ago that we should never compare ourselves to others. Everybody's life is so different and so unique. Even people with the same exact medical condition have a completely different background, a completely different family dynamic, a completely different support system. So it's really easy to try to look at others and get down emotionally, but that's the thing. Again, we can focus in life, we can focus on the negative, or we can focus on the positive. And it's really easy to focus on the negative sometimes, but I challenge you to just do your best to keep focusing on the positive and focus on the wonderful stories and the amazing opportunities that are out there.
I agree. It sounds like I'm going to have audio problem. So I'm going to wrap up. We're going. Someday technology will be compatible with
just another one of our many detours.
It's a little bit. Rob, thank you for sharing your story today.
Thank you, Lisa. It was my pleasure, and thank you for the comments and everybody who participated. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Great. Thanks, everybody.